again, going back to the ugly ads versus pretty ads, it's like neither, because it's never about the camera that it was shot on. It's about why you're creating it in the first place.
Hello, hope everyone is doing well and welcome to another episode of Ecom Life with me, Phil Kiel. Now, it's been a couple of weeks since I last uploaded an episode of this podcast. I'm looking forward to putting out a episode running through what we've been doing over the past couple of weeks. Definitely been busy from both a hiring point of view, clients onboarding, and then also current clients and the activity that we've been doing with them. I'm sure everyone working in ecom is, just starting to build up activity for Q4. If not, you've already started it previously. So looking forward to running through what we've been doing for current brands and then also new brands that we're starting to work with at the moment. So a bit of a special episode this week. I'm going to interview Matthew Gattozzi from Goodo Studios. Now, Matthew's got a really interesting story into how he started his agency. Matthew works primarily in creative. Now, funnily enough, the day before this podcast was recorded with Matthew, we were both on a call with a number of people from the Foxwell founders community, which we're both members of. If you're unsure what that is, I definitely recommend taking a look. I'll put the link in the show notes. So yeah, this podcast starts just as we're discussing some of the things that were going on in that call. So let's get into it.
And somebody asked a good question about essentially should you cold email, should you not cold email? Do you guys do a Facebook funnel? And so that was kind of interesting to hear how people are getting clients. And I had to jump, but I want to continue to hear more about what people are doing, because I think that's honestly the hardest thing for a service business is you don't want to be scammy, right? You want to be high quality, but then also you can't, in my opinion, you can't rely only on inbound leads coming in. And content is great, but it's also hard, that's not easy. It was just interesting to hear, but I had to jump, so I didn't get to hear everybody's response, but I think that would be a good conversation to have.
You're right, you can't rely on inbound, you can't rely on referrals. You could get very busy with referrals in a very short amount of time and then not get another referral for 6 to 12 months, and then, so you're waiting on that. We found new biz does go busy and quiet, and just at that period when you're what's going on, if we stopped growing, all of a sudden it's everyone right now in the last couple of weeks it's got really busy, whereas August from a new biz point of view was quiet, but that's logical, people.
That's literally how I felt. The last I had finished up some big projects, and so in some ways it was good for me to be relaxed. I got to focus more on my business. But then there were moments where I was okay, we gotta keep going. We can't not, and you can't think that growth is this month over month thing. It's not the same as as a software business, right? But it's easy to compare yourself to oh, you just see these numbers going up, and it's not the case when you're working with people and services. But yeah, even just yesterday closed multiple deals, all coming from different spaces. But it was just funny because it's I think part of it's also kind of a mental game as much as outreach or the content or any of that stuff. It's you got to be even the whole way through, but that's just really hard to do when because if you average it out, you get the highs and the lows, you get that middle. But if you're riding those highs and lows, it's hard. So you got to be able to be average through it all, which is difficult.
I mean, the synergies between growing a service business like what we're doing and media buying and a sale or an offer on an ecom website is great, but it's a nightmare because you get that high of the sale and the offer, and then you get that low afterwards. And actually, in hindsight, I would exchange that for just consistency. Week on week growth in a going up in the right direction, rather than a huge high during a sale and then a huge low after the sale. It's emotional, isn't it? What we found to be, so we've been around for like 4 or 5 years, and what we found is it lines exactly with what you were saying, which is consistency, showing up when new biz is good and when new biz is bad, like just showing up the same amount and not. It's like testing creative in ad accounts, isn't it? When performance is great, you've got to still keep testing creative, and when performance is bad, don't dramatically increase the number of creatives that you're testing. Just keep going and at the same pace that you were previously, because that's gonna, be controllable and manageable. So like when it comes to us putting out content, we just try and keep the momentum going at the same rate and try and ignore that like fear that the world is ending just because you've had a quiet week or whatever. Because next week, like you said, next week you'll close 3 deals on one day.
Yeah, and I think too, like the power of the network is like by showing up every day, like you can get your network to be a little bit stronger. Like even this week, I spent a lot of time, like a lot of my calendar is just like meeting with tech partners, which potentially could be like this great opportunity, for, partnerships, newsletter subscriptions or sponsors, like a bunch of different things, right? They could refer somebody. And so it's like sometimes too, the actions you take can feel not necessarily empty, but just like they're hard. Like, it's just like you don't get that direct ROI. So it's hard emotionally because you're like, I'm spending all this time meeting these people, but you don't know the return yet. So, and that's kind of true with content as well. And that's, I think every business feels that way. Even like direct to consumer brands, that's why they're afraid to, invest in organic content, because it's like, oh, is this going to work? What's the ROI? It's hard to, invest in something that you're like, is such a long-term game. So I like that idea of just showing up, because I think, you still need to do that regardless, because you don't know what the network effects are going to be later on.
Yeah. When there is something that isn't directly trackable, so, this recording of this podcast, like what's the ROI for me? What's the ROI for you? Like difficult to track. I always personally try and review it as, am I proud that I did that? And like, does that make me 1% better tomorrow? And 100% that is correct. We're talking about stuff that we enjoy. We're both learning different skills. So if you do that for a year, the incremental gain is going to be huge, isn't it? But if you just do it once and then give up, you might as well have not done it in the first place.
Yeah, and also like think about like the value of just having this conversation right now. That's when I was doing my podcast, that was the value, was like I got to meet people, and I actually got some clients from it, like because I worked with those people that I was interviewing. And so like obviously that made it worth it, right? Like one client would make all the effort worth it. But yeah, like it also just helps like get yourself out there. You're gonna have conversations you probably wouldn't have if we weren't. We've been doing the Triple Whale podcast and some other podcasts for some other people in the space. So it's kind of put our podcast in the back burner, just because it's like there's just so much to those podcasts. It's almost like to do our own, it's like kind of not that it's not that the joy's kind of gone away in a little bit. So I haven't put it back on, but I know that you'll probably find a lot of value from doing this. Like just if you do like 20 conversations, it's like 20 conversations you probably wouldn't have had, so that's all worth it. And most people will say yes to a podcast, but not say yes to the same amount of time of a Zoom call. I mean, I probably would. If you were like, oh, let's connect, I probably would say yes. But like other more important people than me might say no. But if you say like, can you jump on a podcast? They will say yes. They don't ask you what's your audience size. They don't care. They'd just be on a podcast though, which is hilarious in my opinion. So,
Goodo Studios. Tell me about that. Give me the pitch.
All right, Goodo Studios. We create content for consumer brands. We work in 3 different ways. The first way being, photos and videos, like high-end production, cinema cameras, shooting for, website, product pages, email, like just when you need really nice brand assets, that's one way we work. The second way we work is, ad optimization and editing. So we come up with, creative strategy, new ad concepts to test. We take the assets from the brand's, content library, and we basically remix everything. What I like to say is we try to extract as much value out of the assets that they already have, especially before they go and create new things. Then the third way that we work is doing TikTok organic and user-generated content. A lot of the what we do focus on is the TikTok organic strategy, finding the creators, managing the creators, and then the actual production of those videos, posting it for the brand. We all obviously can do that also for ads, but I think that medium is kind of changing every day. So we're just, I'll just keep that at that for describing that service. And those are the 3 ways that we work. And we love to work with brands, but we also plug into a lot of different agencies. So we've worked with like a lot of paid media agencies to collaborate with their team, because a lot of times they don't have that kind of creative output. Maybe they do like a lot of graphics, but video editing is something that's really hard to manage, and they just don't have the team to do it. So we can plug in to people like that as well.
That like high-end production piece, you don't hear about that very often. Is that like your background, or is that, someone else on the team who sort of come from that more traditional shoot style?
Yeah, that's actually how I like kind of got into everything. So like I started, I think, going back in my story, I was a professional dancer, ballet dancer, which is a pretty interesting career. And I trained my whole life for that. As I was, performing and being a professional, I also kind of had like a blog, and I had a camera and I would share photos. I started making really stupid vlogs. This is back when Casey Neistat was vlogging in 2016. Shout out to Casey, because he is back now on YouTube, which life is good. Hopefully the economy will be back, because when he was vlogging, the economy was good. So, but I just was really inspired by kind of vlogs and things like that. So I was making stupid YouTube videos. Got injured, hurt my back, so I was out of a career. But I had a camera, and I was seeing people do this for brands. I was like, I can do that too. Naively, but also in a way that I was really inspired to do it. So that's how I started freelancing, just working with local businesses, restaurants, just trying to get better and better. COVID hit, all my local business, events, everything like went away. So I started looking at grocery stores, because that was the only thing that was open. Started looking at brands. That's kind of how I got into like the e-commerce space, and started to see like, oh, there's a whole new space here. And that's when I really started to like understand that, things, I always came from this idea of like just making beautiful stories and making beautiful content. But then I started seeing how ads really worked, and how they were really created. And I realized that there's way more to it. There's more of a science to it. And that's kind of how I started to understand like creative strategy, understanding like hooks and things like that. And so, yeah, that's really my background. And, obviously media has changed. TikTok has now been a whole thing, which is a whole nother service. Obviously that didn't happen, even 2 years ago. So things are changing, but I think overall that's been my background. And I think that's always kind of also my North Star is I want to make sure that, yes, we're doing ads. Yes, we're doing TikToks. All these things are great. But I do think that when you're really trying to establish a brand, you really need those beautiful brand assets. And I really want to make sure that we don't shy away from that, like as a service, because I think it's super important. That is, you're starting to see that change a lot, just because people are doing a lot of ads just off of like UGC. But I do think that if a brand wants to elevate their visual brand, they do need to actually create photos and videos that are like high end. Maybe not to start, but I think once you're getting past that like 1 million mark, you definitely need to start thinking about something like that.
Is the sell on the high end stuff harder for a brand to understand because there's so much content online about like UGC, performance UGC is the piece of the puzzle that you need?
Yeah, no, it's hard. I think it's so interesting because back when Facebook ads were trackable and everything was right in the world, um, I think what you started to see was a lot more of that higher end video production, and you kind of also like some of those old D2C ads, where it's like really beautifully shot. They've got some guy kind of saying some witty script. You start to see a lot of that. And then obviously TikTok shifted a lot of that production. So brands almost were like, oh, wow, we need to spend a lot of money on production. Like that used to be the thing. And now it's kind of shifted of, oh, we can kind of get away with just doing UGC and things like that. Yes, it is harder to sell those like higher end packages, especially like not many brands have like 10, 20K to create, photos and videos. But there's two things that I really like to break down when it comes to a package like this. One is the unit economics of content. One UGC video can go the distance sometimes, but there's not many places you can like put that. But a high-end photo can go so many different places. You could put that on a printout, you could put that on an email, you could put that on a billboard on the side of a truck. You can make that into like 10, 15 different graphics. There's so many more product page, website. I mean, there's like a ton of different use cases. So even though you may have paid like, $10,000 for 30 photos, let's say, or whatever, like that sounds expensive, but when you really break down the use case and the unit economics, that's not that bad. But when you break down the unit economics of a UGC, it's not like that great. Like you can't really use it. It's not as flexible as people may, make it out to be. The second thing about that is when you think about your brand holistically, let's get away from just performance in general. When you think about your brand holistically, you want the experience for the customer to be cohesive. Now, obviously, like what's going to be on TikTok is going to be different than like what's on your website, but having the same intention behind what's being created is really important. And not all UGC creators are created equal. And there's a lot of times where, yes, you might get the cheaper option, but it doesn't mean that that person fully understands how the customer, experiences with content throughout every single channel. And so working with, a creative studio like ourselves, like Goodo Studios, we do understand where UGC is placed, but we also understand like where other content, like a website video or something like that, also stands within your brand experience. And so I think also understanding like how a team like us can actually help that is super important. So yes, a little bit more expensive, but when you think about what you can do with photos and videos that are shot on high-end cameras, it's actually not that bad, but it is a harder sell. For me personally, what I like to say is let's look at what you already have first, extract as much value out of the content library because most people haven't before we go and shoot. So, not all the time we're coming guns blazing with, here, spend 20K on a crazy video and photos and, models and all that stuff. We start with like editing or TikTok, but the goal is as we're building out those channels and they want to elevate their visual brand, they can stay in-house with us. Everything's going to be cohesive. And, ultimately we're like a full stack creative team for them.
I know, just thinking back to some of like our accounts over the past couple of years, I know there's been a few cases where we've had really high quality images provided which we've took the raw asset, turned it into like lots of different carousels or, you know, statics or GIFs, and been able to like validate different concepts just by using that same like one image, you know, different text overlays, reviews, USPs, you know, all these different concepts, and pull out the value from that like one single JPEG. The one thing that I do really like about studio photography is the legibility that you get of the product. And this is something that we always come back to when we're, you know, talking to brands about why we think certain creative is winning, or when we're talking to different brands about what they should be looking for next, is how legible is the product in the image to the customer. If it's not very legible, and also to the platform, because the platform obviously scans the image to try and understand what's in the image, that definitely happens. And like the higher quality images will always be more legible. There's going to be professionally shot, the background is going to be considered. And when you start going into performance UGC, there's going to be more variables that you can't control. So like the lighting, the person's house, you know, they're holding the product in front of a jumper, those sort of things, which, you know, like you said, not all content creators are created equally. Worst case scenario, there's going to be poor legibility, isn't there?
Yeah, no, totally. And I think like something that, you know, even just for myself, like I'm a pretty frugal person. I don't come from like a ton of money. And so I've always, you know, come from this space of, you know, mindset of like, can I get a deal? Can I, just how can I save, right? And you know, a lot of times I might, you know, if I'm buying a product, I might go for the middle version, not the high end version. And what I have found, or sometimes the low version, and what I have found is that I tend to get frustrated with that low end version, or I end up having to buy 2 pairs of whatever because that low end version, didn't last comparative to that high end version. And so not to say that, you know, you shouldn't be getting UGC, not to say you shouldn't be getting, you know, discounts and working with your budget. Like, don't just get expensive things just to get expensive things. But when you are looking to get high quality images, you have to find the team that really understands those small details, like what's in the background. I'm dropping a thread like pretty soon, just kind of showing off like some background on a photo shoot that we did. And like we literally shopped 4 clothes that are brand colors. Like they had some like purples. So we went to different stores to find like colors that like kind of match and was like on brand. And like those are the small details that you need to find. And if you're paying for cheap services, you get like a discount for sure, but you're going to spend your time, like more time managing those people, or you're going to have to like do more, which is not time is money. So you're not really getting a discount there. And you're going to, you know, not really have a partner that's going to truly understand like holistically everything, that's going on in each of those shoots. If you spend the money, basically, if you think about investing in a team, if you're going to give them money, that gives them budget to create better things, right? Like that's how I see it, is like, I need more budget so that I can make a better product for you, not because I'm trying to net like more profit. And I think you have to be able to communicate those things, but I do think it's really important. And I think, you know, it's really helpful for you as a brand. And to go to a point about like, you know, there's a whole conversation like ugly ads versus pretty ads, like what works, what doesn't work. Of course, I'm all about creating pretty ads that convert, you know, so it's all about, you need to have intention. Of course, you need to like have these converting factors and all that stuff, but that doesn't mean that you can't have something that looks good. And I think brands need to understand that you need to build a brand. Like you need to build something that people recognize and that people understand. And if you're just getting, you know, content from these marketplaces, you're just a dime a dozen. Like it's all going to look kind of the same. So you need to do something that's different. So you need to find a creative partner that's going to actually help you stand out. And that doesn't mean that it has to be shot on an expensive camera, but you do need to find a partner that's going to help you actually build your visual brand, build a story that makes you stand out, because you're probably, with competitors, you're probably, going after the same audience as another brand. So what's going to make you different? And so I think more brands need to think about that versus trying to get a deal or, do the trends that everybody else is doing. You got to find a way to establish yourself. So that's my goal, is how can we help brands establish themselves visually?
Do you think that's the reason why, if you think about like earlier in the year, it was, or like even last year, it was, performance UGC is doing XYZ, like this is where all our spend is going, this is what we're invested in completely. And the focus was kind of on the asset at the end. Like, it doesn't matter what it is, as long as it's a video, as long as it's like 9:16, as long as it's got like, it was made in TikTok, as long as that's what the raw video out of the other end looks like, that'll work. Do you think that's why we're now focusing so much more on the strategy, the reason why the creative exists, the brief, like the storytelling within the video, and a little bit less on jumping on trends from TikTok? Do you think that's why a lot more of the content seems to be focused around that, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think that, before I jump into creative strategy, because I love that we brought this up, but I think that, inherently, a great video is a great video. Full stop. A great ad is a great ad. That's it. Like, that it's not, a great ad is not because it was a cool trend. A great ad is because there was something that made you compelled to take action. It did its job, right? We've seen that with Ogilvy, with amazing text and copywriting and, simple newspaper ads. We've seen that like on TV, Super Bowl ads, things like that. Just because it's on TV doesn't mean it's a great ad. Just because it's on Facebook doesn't mean it's a great ad, or TikTok or whatever. A real consumer, like marketers aside, a real consumer is not like, dang, this video was cool because it was shot on an iPhone and it has the robot voice and all this stuff, and now I want to buy this product. They want to buy the product because it spoke to them. That's why the ad works. And I've seen TikTok videos, millions of views, and guess what? They're shot horizontally and posted horizontally, where you have to move your camera literally horizontally. It breaks all the rules. Why did I still watch that video, and why did millions of other people watch that video? Because it was a good video. Nobody was like, oh, I'm not gonna watch this video because it wasn't vertical. Like, it caught my attention and millions of others' attention. So I think when brands, and I think unfortunately there's a lot of people online who just say things that are like, oh, this is what's working. And so people are like, okay, great, I'm gonna do what's working. They forget what's going to make them, what's their brand, what's their visual brand that actually keeps them to the core of who they are. And then two, I think, they're more focused on how it's being created versus like the actual substance and how that could relate to their brand. So I think that it has unfortunately hurt a lot of people. And I think too, like, that also kind of brings in like the agency space in general. I think that like, because of this UGC space, it unfortunately has like, it's a lot of these, agencies have recently just kind of popped off, and they say, oh, we do creative. And what they're saying is that they outsource their UGC. They are just, a glorified project manager, to be honest. They're not, like, they weren't creators before that. They didn't create content prior to that. They're just relying on, a few hooks and TikTok trends, and they're just giving that to brands at a cheap rate. Whereas like, we actually were creating content before TikTok existed, and we were doing that, right? And so I think that like, brands need to really understand like who they're partnering with. But then also like, understand that it's not about the trends. It's about how are you going to compel somebody to take action, which is where creative strategy really comes into play. And I think it's a fantastic thing that people are actually thinking about this stuff and actually thinking about, wait, what's going to compel my customer to take action? And I think more people now are realizing that it's not because you said 3 reasons why with TikTok robot voice. It's because those reasons are compelling or could be compelling to the person looking for a solution to their problem. And so I think people are now starting to see that. I think that you're going to see, higher end content come into play, but the strategy behind it should still be the same. So I think what people, again, going back to the ugly ads versus pretty ads, it's like neither, because it's never about the camera that it was shot on. It's about why you're creating it in the first place. So that's that's a rant on that. But I think that, people, it's beautiful that people are actually starting to consider the viewer versus this makes us look good, or it's about our ego. Like, isn't this a sick video? Or, or it's a trend. It's working for this brand. It should work for us. And then they're frustrated that it's not, because they're not doing that video because of the intention behind it. They're doing it because it's a trend. And so I think that's going to hurt a lot of brands. You should a trend started, or a trend is a thing because somebody decided to do it first. Try to be the person to do something first versus, oh, it's working for everybody else, so let's just do that.
Yeah, let's try and break new ground rather than jump on the bandwagon.
I mean, obviously there are things that are best practices, or like if those things are working, awesome, like definitely try it out, test it out. But like, you also need to have an edge. Like, if your ad account looks the same as, another basic brand, it's like you're basic. Like, when you think about like all the great brands, what stands out to you? It's like the content. That is huge. Obviously, like content can be the moat, right, for many brands, but you have to have a great product first. Like, you got to build the castle before you build the moat. But once you have the product, right, like, you need to build that moat, and that's going to be content. That's like the difference maker between somebody that's really great and not really great, or a brand that's really great and not really great, is like their content. And I think that like, you can't just be the same. You got to do something. You got to try something that's out there, that's different, that's gonna make people like recognize who you are. If you're just kind of the same TikTok, you're gonna be, forgotten pretty easily.
So we've spoke about sort of like the reasons why someone should go into like investing in that higher end content. If a brand's been burnt already, or even if we're talking to like an agency or a media buyer, if they've been burnt already with those like lower priced UGC pieces that, there's less thought behind them, what would be like the 2 things you would recommend they focus on when it comes to, okay, let's try again from a performance UGC point of view, like before they think about the trends or the music or anything like that? Where would they start?
Yeah, first off, if anybody's hearing this and they've been burned, I apologize. I think there's, we're in the service business and we've got to make it right. I think for me, we're not perfect. We don't get things right, but I definitely want to make sure that like, hey, if something's wrong, we will reshoot that. Like, I don't leave satisfied until you're satisfied, right? And I know that I'm not gonna, act like I'm the best. I'm not gonna act like, everything we create is just incredible. There are times where things fail. There's times where we fail, but I will own up to those things. And so I think when you're looking for a service provider, you have to look for people who are confident enough where they can own up to, hey, we will make things right. Now, it doesn't mean that there needs to be some sort of guarantee, because I think that's also, although I do guarantee my work, I think that there are, many Alex Hormozy fans who see his book, and it's a great book about the guarantee. And so now everybody's just doing the guarantee and like, no strings attached, like all these different things, right? Add in the buzzwords, but I'd be careful of those things. But I would just say you need to find somebody that's confident but humble enough to make their corrections if things are wrong. The second thing is I'd ask for like their process, breaking down their process. what does that look like? That's really important because I think that there's a lot of, cheaper services out there, but you might be the one that has to create the creative brief. You might have to do a lot of things. And so you really want to make sure, understand who's in charge of what and what does that look like. Do your research on these people. I had a client or a potential client who actually became a client, asked for a reference, gave that reference. They were like, cool, I just closed a deal. And I didn't even know that this person went and asked two past clients, but they did. And they had great reviews. And so that convinced them that they should work with me. And I think that you should really think about where, why, who are these people that you're working with? They might seem like they have really great work, but who are some of their past clients? How did that go? Don't be afraid to ask around before you buy in. And then the last thing I would say is understand why you need a service provider in the first place. Do you need to do this internally? Maybe you just need a little bit of consulting and you actually can just build this internally. Figure out what you really need as a brand. And I think that that's where that might really help you not get burned by an agency or a service provider, because you really understand why you need this and understand what you need out of this engagement prior to having those conversations. And I think that not every agency is going to say no to you. And I know in the past, I used to, and this is of my fault because I was younger. I didn't really fully know. I would be able to say yes. And I can do that. We can do this, sure. But now what I'm realizing is there's so much power in really understanding what they really need. And then being able to say, no, I don't think you guys are a good fit. And so you want to make sure that you know what you need so that they can really figure out if they're a good fit or not for you. So those are some things I would look into as you're just shopping around. That's for creative, but also not for creative as well. If you end up doing UGC creators, going directly with creators, you have to be ready internally to be able to do a lot of creative strategy and creator management and things like that. That takes a lot of time. So if you're not doing that, I would suggest working with more of a boutique service like a Goodo Studios or something like that, where we can really manage those creators. And I would stay away from marketplaces because that's going to be a lot of hit or miss. And I've had every client that's come to me, potential or not, I've always asked them what they've done before. And they've always said something about a marketplace and how even though it was cheap, it never was worth it. And so I've never seen it benefit people. I've seen it hurt more people than helped more people. So I would stay away from those situations as much as possible.
Do you think that on that marketplace bit, I imagine it's potentially not the fault of the marketplace, but it's more of a fault of it just becomes a very black and white sort of exchange between here's the product, here's a small amount of money, and I'm going to provide you a video file back in exchange for that. And there's no sort of real consideration on why you should use that video or if video is the best thing for you to use right now.
I think it's because I actually think it's completely the marketplace's fault, to be honest, because they're the ones, they are creating that space. So they are creating expectations for two people, the creators and for the brands. For the brands, their expectation is, look at this software. It's so easy. You could just do everything on our platform. We've got thousands of creators, and so they create this, and it's cheap. It's this and that. But when you think about you as a brand, you should feel unique, right? Your content should be unique. And so having a one-size-fits-all solution doesn't work when your brand is unique. It doesn't. You need to have edits. You need to have more control. You need to have that flexibility. And a marketplace or whatever, an all-in-one solution doesn't really give you that. And so a lot of brands struggle with getting edits or corrections, or maybe the briefs are not always as good. And so I think that's really hurtful. And so you need to have more of a white glove service to really succeed, or again, build it out internally. But understand that that's really difficult. So I think that's really hard. And then I think too, like, you know, not all creators are equal, but the pricing is equal. And so I think that is also hard, because it's like, for some people, that's a lot of money. For some other people, it's like a little money. And the quality control, if you can just have tens of thousands of creators in a marketplace, how are you vetting those people? Like that is like crazy. And then also, like, surely there's like the way that those work, it's like you're picking some people, but then the best creators, all these other brands are using that same one creator. So then it's like, who is that creator for? It's so you kind of lose the charm of like, isn't this supposed to be from my customer? Like that's like originally what this was. And so, yeah, I think that we're really struggling with that. And I think that there's a lot of different, platforms and marketplaces, even like on Shopify, even on TikTok. But I think now we're also getting into this weird space of like, who's an influencer? Like, it used to be influencer, but then this whole concept of creator economy came up, which kind of just slapped creator on top of influencer. But then it's like, well, what's an influencer? What's a creator? Is it the same thing? Is it not? And so, like, why is one person charging thousands of dollars for one video and then the same person is charging $100? So you're getting this weird price difference as well. And there's no way a marketplace can consolidate all that stuff in a $49, $50 video or whatever it is. So I would just be careful of those. Again, you should be unique. Your brand is unique. You're doing something so different than anybody has ever created. At least that's what it should be, right? And your content should be like that. So you need to find partners that are going to actually help you become unique visually. And a marketplace just won't do that. And yeah, I've had some people reach out to me about marketplaces, and I was like, I'm not going to be sponsored by you. I'm not going to do this. Like, you've hurt so many brands. It's like ridiculous. And I just think that they're doing it for software money, to be honest. And it's not helpful to the brands. And I have no qualms about saying that. Like, I will go off about that because I just know how this stuff works. Like, I know how hard it is to create creative. There's no way you can do that at scale at that level. It's just, people are going to get burned that way.
So last question, like you said, I appreciate your point, earlier on, like, we're not perfect as an agency. No one's perfect as an agency, even though, on Twitter, it seems like everyone's living their best life, all the threads, all the engagement, no one's making mistakes. What's the one bit that either you're working on personally or like the agency is trying to upskill, get better at? What's the focus?
Right now I'm just like working so hard on customer experience. I want people to feel like if you're spending a lot of money with us, you're getting way more value out of it. And so I'm really trying to build what that looks like, partnerships, to help them in other parts of their business. Like, I understand that, like, our services is very like specific, like we don't even do paid media. We don't even do email. We're not like a traditional agency. We're more of a creative studio, honestly. But I do understand how a lot of our work, or how many other parts of the business it takes for a brand to be great. And so I want them to be able to say, if we're working with Goodo Studios, we have access to even more resources beyond that. I'm focused on, how can we make communication better? How can we, just make it feel like they can trust us? It's a hard process. It's scary. Like, spending thousands of dollars is not easy. Like, that is not something that's like easy to do. And to be honest, I feel so grateful that people would even trust me with that money. And so I want to be able to give them an incredible experience. I know that like that is not necessarily something that like, is gonna like 10x the growth right away. Like it's not something that, oh wow, by putting this in and we've systematized everything so we can take on 20 more clients. Like it's actually more laborious, if anything. Like it's more like hard work to do. But going back to something I said before, which is I had past clients vouch for me and I didn't ask them to. And they didn't even have the experience that like they, like people are having now. And that's really, really humbling. And that makes me feel like, dang, like I want to make sure that no matter what happens, people can leave feeling like, that it was great to work with these people. Or, dang, even if it didn't work, even though these people are not perfect, they really went out of their way to make it right, or, like even if us as a brand, we weren't maybe the best fit for you guys, or, we need to shift, or, something financially came up, we still can speak highly of that experience. Like there was something different that when we worked with them than with any other agency, like they had just kind of this different, effect. That's what I'm focused on. And then ultimately like the customer experience, but then the product. So no matter where we go, the product at its core should always be great. So it doesn't matter how cool our newsletter is. It doesn't matter how, podcast, Twitter, the product always needs to be great. At the end of the day, that is the service that we're selling. That always needs to be great. I don't care what systems or Notion templates you've got. If you got a bad service, you've got a bad service. And so that also focuses on the customer experience as well. And yeah, so no matter how big the team gets, that will always be the thing that I'm quality checking, whether that's communication or the actual service. That's what I'm focused on. I'm curious, like, what are you working on? Like, what's the thing that you're focused on? Like outside of like, of course, like Black Friday and like all that stuff, like you as like a person that's owning your business, like what are you focused on?
Good question. So generally we're upskilling the team on creative strategy. I think pretty much even if you're the best creative strategist in the world, I think, tomorrow it'll be different and the day after that it'll be different what works. So I don't think anyone can stop developing there. And that even goes to people on our team in admin or email or Google managers. We're trying to, upscale them on creative strategy there, because I truly think that it will help all platforms, not just, making 9x16 videos. I think if everyone on the team gets better at that, then like you said, our product will get better, and client happiness will get better. We've had a good focus this year on those systems and processes, and that while I think we'll never stop developing those, I do agree that Notion can get in the way of product. I agree with that, but that doesn't pop off on Twitter, does it? So like, focus on your product as an agency isn't as exciting as here's our top 5 Notion templates that you can download.
I saw a tweet that was like something about like, how agencies will like give you like a really cool Notion like template like portal thing at the beginning and then like never use it for the rest of their project. And I just think that's like hilarious, because like I'm not somebody that's like a systems type guy. Like I'm a creative, right? Like I am, not, I've learned that I need to be, and I've learned to like get better, and I've paid to get help in those things. And I have to keep up with it. It's not really my strength, but I know I need to do it. But it's funny because I think people can like feel good. And on the flip side, a lot of people can feel good because they've got all these quote unquote systems, but like the service is like, it's like solid, but it's not like anything amazing, but like it feels good to like check the to-do and to check all the portals and this and that. And like, it's nice to have, like you should do those things, but the things that you're talking about, like upskilling your other employees, even if they're not touching it, but like just so that they could understand it, like that's so important. Like people need to understand how does this whole thing work? And that goes back to like the cohesive thing. Like what's happening on Google should also be like cohesive with like what's happening on TikTok and Facebook and all these different places. And so you need to have that education. So it's just funny. Like, I think that like, yeah, it looks good. And like it's not just about looking good. It's about really, just executing. Executing doesn't mean checking off to-do lists. It means like the service actually brings an ROI, like real revenue to the business,
Yeah, I know I've been a bit of a pain sometimes with the team when they've pushed forward with like a process or a template or a system that they want to bring in, and I've sort of asked the question that I wish other people would ask me, which is, okay, but where have you seen that process improve performance? And I'm willing to test the process on a small number of accounts or on one client or something like that, but we're not going to apply a new process to every client across the team without like validating it, because it's probably going to take our eye off the ball and it could actually make performance worse. So I do think if either you should either ask that question to someone else, or you should ask that question to yourself, like, has this improved performance or not? And if the answer is we don't know, then keep testing it. But if the answer is no, then has it saved time? Has it, improved client happiness? Because that's obviously a win still. But if there's like nothing, then it's kind of like, well, you should probably stick with what you're doing, or look for something that does tick some sort of, KPI.
Yeah, it's like people are like, should I use ClickUp? Should I use Notion? Should I use this or that? It's like, if you have just do really good work first, like just focus on that. Then like organize your thoughts, like put together, a step-by-step process, like put together a checklist first before you start building out like automations and all this stuff. And then to be honest, like I paid a group because they had a great sales CRM, project management tool, all that stuff in Airtable. And I was like, I am not a systems person. I'm not going to build out something on anything crazy. I'm going to pay for that. And I did. And they built it out all for me and I use it. And like, could I go to ClickUp? Could I go to Notion? Maybe, sure. But like, it helps that I've already paid for something. So I don't want to change because I've already paid for this system. But two, it's like, the difference is not like that wild, right? Where it's like, wow, you're going to get some, insane difference. And I think it's like, people are more focused on like the systems. And I think too, even this is going to like finding a partner is like, there are a lot of agency owners that are just becoming agency owners just because they want like a good cash flow thing, versus like there are actual people out there that actually want to like be a partner to you. Like, I want to be creating Super Bowl ads. I'm not going to change my services for the next 10 years. Like, this is what I'm doing. Like, this is what I want to do. I've always set out to do this thing. I don't need systems to, improve my studio, agency, whatever, to get more cash flow to then, leave. Like, I don't need to do that. And I think a lot of times people are trying to systematize things so that they can get like monthly recurring revenue and then like, 10x their bank account. And I think that like you need to have a good system, but like you don't need to waste your time to just, for the sake of being productive or quote unquote productive, because I really doubt I don't think that's actually happening, to be honest.
Yeah, it's like good creative in a bad ad account, it'll still probably work. Or bad creative, bad ad account, shit hot product, it'll still probably work. It's not the process doesn't make it work. It's the thought that makes it work, isn't it?
No Notion template's gonna change like the ads that are being created. Like it will help the team be organized, sure, but it's not like, you're not gonna change how I shoot on a camera. Like, surely not. Like, that's not gonna happen. Like, it'll keep you organized to streamline everything and be on time, but it's not gonna change like the skill of the actual creation and things like that. It will help for sure. I'm not saying it's nothing at all, but like I think, you know, just focusing on that service is so key. And I like that I like that you're focusing on like education for everybody, because I think if everybody's educated, that's way better of like an hour a week than trying to implement a new system on ClickUp or Notion or any of that stuff. Like that's just distracting.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Well, thanks, Matthew. We're gonna have to call it a day. Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate you coming on, and I think we should put it in for a couple of months' time, and we can see where we are in Q4. How's that sound?
Yeah, we'll do a recap. Hopefully, I can tell you this, like my systems probably won't change. I'm not gonna lie. Like I probably won't. I don't know how to use Notion, so you know, don't ask me about that. But it was super great to chat, and yeah, I think great conversation on finding the right partners. And I think it's important to do your homework if you're looking for the right partner. And it's okay if you're not a good fit. Find the people that are gonna really be your partner to really help you in your business.
So there we have it. Really enjoyed that episode interviewing Matthew Gattozzi from Goodo Studios. It felt like we spoke about a number of different topics which were really relevant. Hopefully you found some benefit in those topics, running through, you know, how he finds new brands and new clients to work with for his agency. If you are looking to work with content creators or a content creation agency, what you should be asking for, what you should be focusing on, and you know, what else he's excited to be working on for the rest of this year. So got more interview episodes coming up very shortly, so make sure you subscribe. Really looking forward to sharing them, and also looking forward to getting back into my routine of recording some of those one-on-one episodes where I run through what we're working on as an agency. Thanks, speak soon.